title that Thomas and I have chosen is Unlocking Human Potential. I was delighted when he briefed me on this talk to adopt that title. Those of you who know the Qatar Foundation well will realize that that is the Qatar Foundation's motto, and it fits extremely well Thomas's talk and mine. In a slight amalgamation of his material and mine, I'm going to talk about three things. I'll start with cities, and then I'll talk about the changes in computation that are happening and have happened, that are influencing our capacity to innovate, create, and solve problems. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about the scientific method and how those things are coming together in an extremely productive way. You'll recognize this skyline. This is Doha at night, looking across the bay from the Corniche, from the old city to the new. Most of this city that we see here didn't exist 10 years ago. It exists now. It exists because of human inventiveness and the inventions that humans made about 150 years ago. The things that we created as a species about 150 years ago, to about 100 years ago, are very evident in this city. We couldn't have created this city 1,000 years ago. We could only create it now. A city like this on the water, near the water, in some cases the footings are in the water, relies on steel, it relies on manufacturing technologies, it relies on computation. Many of these wonderful buildings that we enjoy have their shape because of computer-aided design and fabrication. We couldn't have done this without the inventions beginning 100 years ago. And transportation systems were essential to this. Humans invented and created those transportation systems. So things that we have done as a species together have given us this capacity. And this is a very obvious capacity to create cities like this. There is an enormous movement in humanity into cities. You probably know the data for that as well as I, but an enormous migration of humans from rural settings to cities continues, and as that happens, we become more and more effective as a species at improving many aspects of our lives. We create many challenges as well as we do that. A lovely quote that Thomas and I shared some months ago is here from John Sexton, who's the president of the New York University. He quoted Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who said, "If you want to build a great city, start a great university and wait 200 years. John Sexton said, things have changed. Now you only have to wait 20. Of course, he was establishing NYU Abu Dhabi at the time, and I think he was trying to persuade people that what he was doing was a good thing. But it is very probably true that knowledge and cities are going together in a way that is changing the world. I want to talk now for a while about computation and what is happening with computation. And I'll show you some diagrams illustrating where we've been and very, very probably where we're going. This slide shows computing power as it's doubled, and Moore's law says, and it's been proven very right over the last 20 years, that computing power doubles roughly every 18 months, perhaps in a bad period only every 2 years. So computing power is getting better and better. The horizontal axis, I can't quite see it from here, but the horizontal axis is the amount of data stored. The vertical axis is the speed at which we do these things. This isn't a normal sort of graph. This isn't 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 1,000, 1,000 times 1,000, 1,000 times 1,000, and 1,000 times 1,000, the same on the vertical axis. So this is an extraordinarily accelerated exponential graph. And that is what is going on with us. Your eyes are better at seeing the details than mine, so excuse me, I'm going to break the rules and walk out of the square, or the circle. We're moving from the simple capacity of manual calculation, which we all do, and we heard earlier the great things that our brains can do, but manual calculation is a fairly simple task, through the 1985 home computer, the 1996 home computer, and then Deep Blue. That was the first computer that rivaled the human brain in computational ability at a single task, and that was playing chess. The first time a computer came not just equal to, but it consistently beats the best humans at a single task. That's been a very rapid growth as we move through time, and there's every reason to believe that that growth will continue. Up at the top, we see the whole human organism doing everything that we do. It's slightly sobering to realize that we are just beaten by both the blue whale and the elephant. So we're not the most computational capable organism in the animal kingdom, but we're pretty good. A little later on, I'll talk about collective human capability, and of course, we have collective computer capability as well. Flops are the number of, I forget because I'm not actually a computer scientist, but the number of calculations that we can do in a second. And we've moved in our computers, another way of measuring the speed capacity of our computers is we've moved very consistently, extremely consistently over time. And these are Thomas's data. The lower line, which has an extraordinarily close correlation to a straight line, is the top 100 computers in the world at any particular time over time, how good they are. The middle line is the single best computer in the world, how good it's been over time in terms of speed of calculation. And the top line is the combined capability of all of those computers. And it's obvious that we are getting better and better and better at managing data for many, many reasons. Now, TED has an entertainment in the middle, and Thomas decided that there should be a little sort of scientific entertainment, and if the computer works, we're going to move to it now. This is a map of where people are in Washington, D.C. at any point in time throughout the day. Look at the map as people wake up and start to go to school. I hope it's all working. Yes, it is. And then people start to go to work. It's like Doha. The school kids get there first, but then the offices start to fill. And the day wears by, and we're now getting towards 6 p.m., and the school children are starting to go home. And then the office workers to go home. You'll see over by the river on your right, you'll see one place that stays pretty constant. That's the prison. People aren't, we hope, coming and going from the prison at that much of a rate. That's just a nice illustration of what's going on in a city, but it's a simple demonstration of the power of computation in working things out for us. With data like that, we can design transportation systems. We can design emergency systems. We can work out where electricity use will be needed in a situation where we're trying to maximize the efficiency of the community. That's a fairly simple and I believe about an 8-year-old simulation. The next simulation is more recent and a little more scary in some ways. It's a climate simulation of a part of the world. You see moisture over the Pacific. This is a simulation. This isn't a movie of clouds. This is what will happen with moisture over time at a particular temperature relative to densities, relative to human population densities in that part of the world. Again, I have to walk over a little closer, I'm sorry. We're now moving actually through the year as well. The precipitation and the ice pack in the Himalaya and north of the Himalaya. And in a moment, we'll see the monsoon coming in. This is extraordinarily detailed simulation, and it can be run at different temperatures over time. So this sort of thing will help us to predict the duration of snowpacks, the severity of flooding, and the severity of drought. That requires massive computational capability, but it will help us as a species deal with potentially devastating actions that will affect the lives of many billions of people. Thomas then, as he briefed me today, said, I'd love you to talk now about how computation and individual human intelligence and collective human intelligence are coming together. When I talked about Moore's law, computational ability doubling roughly every 18 months, perhaps every 2 years, in my pocket I have a cell phone. I won't take it out because you might see the brand. I don't want you to see the brand. That cell phone has more computational ability than got man to the moon and back safely. My cell phone in my pocket. And that's, the moon was when? I was watching young, and I'm old enough to be young enough to have watched that in 1970 roughly, wasn't it? So that is 40 odd years. We have much more computational capability in our pocket than got man to the moon and back. In briefing me, Thomas said, the rule is now that the most powerful computer in the world today will be in our pockets in 20 years. We have that now as our roadmap. So the most powerful computers of today will be our tools for good, we hope for good, in 20 years. All of us will have that. Let's look now at this graph, which relates brain power with computer power. Now, brain power is actually about 20 watts. You know, we light a small bulb, that's all. We're very efficient machines, much more efficient at the moment in energy use than computers. But let's look at the computation that our brains can do, again, in amount of data stored, this time on the vertical axis, and speed of calculation, this time on the horizontal axis. And again, it's 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000 as you move across that graph. And we start with simple neurons, single neurons. Then we look at computers. Then we get to IBM's Watson, which was a very fine machine, and Blue Gene, I think, gets a mention because Thomas was from ORNL, and ORNL for a long time had the most powerful computer in the world. It was their job to have the most powerful computer in the world. We're approaching the capabilities of the human brain. And this graph just keeps on moving. So the Blue Gene, the capacity to beat chess grandmasters, will very predictably be defeated by increasingly powerful, greater memory, greater speed computers that will rival and then augment our mental capability. And that will continue to change the world in ways that we can't really predict, but we should welcome, embrace, and take advantage of. Here is a graph showing the curve of computer capability relative to an insect. And actually we saw some lovely insects flying around just before the break. I couldn't help but think. He used ants as an analogy of the group of insects working together, and then a group of his devices working together. They even sounded like bees, you know, those things as they flew around. But we're now beyond the intelligence, the computational capability of insects, and we're moving up through increasing complexities of organisms. What this graph shows, I think, with a very solid capacity for prediction, is that computer capability of the fastest and best machines will soon surpass individual humans and then surpass all of our collective intelligence. And that's an interesting thought. And then 20 years later, that capability will be in our pockets. So it's an interesting time ahead of us. I wish I were younger so I could be here to watch it all and to participate. Why do we care about this? I want to come back to cities and then briefly, before I finish, and I'm nearly at time, talk about the scientific method as something that we should use to take those capabilities and enhance them for the benefit of our species and the benefit of the world. We are increasingly living in cities. We're increasingly creating problems. We have phenomenal capabilities, but we have great challenges that we need to address. And the list is long. Climate change is perhaps the most dramatic of them. The enormous problems of human health, feeding our vast population, the ways that we behave relative to each other, our whole social systems are changing. We need extraordinary intelligence to deal with these things productively and well as a species so that we will continue to prosper, continue to use our planet well, and continue to have our species go forward well into the future. We have a phenomenal tool in our hands, and I've been talking about it, and that is computational capability. We can augment our cognition extraordinarily with computation. The other phenomenal tool that we have, and it's a tool that is less than 200 years old, is the scientific method. The methods of science which were laboriously developed in different societies, and things came together around the world about 150 years ago, perhaps 200 if we're generous, when we started systematically to develop hypotheses, to look for evidence, to discard hypotheses that weren't supported by evidence, and go with those that were, enabled us to do many, many of the things that we do today. And it's my strong belief that if we bring together the extraordinary computational ability that our intelligence and the scientific method has allowed us to create, and broad utilization of the scientific method, then the problems that we face today will be problems that we can manage, and we as a species will do well, and our planet will continue to do well. I'll finish coming back to Doha and a quote from John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And again, I was privileged to be alive at the time when he was alive, a true visionary who sadly wasn't with us for long enough. Thank you very much.